Welcome to this session on functional requirements and non-functional requirements. In this session, we are going to understand what is the difference between functional requirements and non-functional requirements. If you're working on a software development project, either as a developer or as a business analyst, these are two common types of requirements which you will always come across. So let's have a look at the difference between functional and non-functional requirements. I'm Abhishek Srivastava. I'm an IT professional. I'm also author of some of the books. Before we start understanding the difference between functional requirements and non-functional requirements, let's try and understand how does the requirements develop in a typical software project. So the first phase when we start getting the requirements for any software application development, it is known as business requirements. This is the primary objective or the reason why a software project is in place, and as a team, we are developing the application. This business requirement is always on the top of the agenda for a customer. So they want to improve the efficiency of a process. They want to create a new product, or there is a good opportunity for an e-commerce product. So the company is looking to launch that product. It could be a book e-commerce website. It could be garments e-commerce website. But there is a definite reason as to why a customer is looking to develop a software application. This is what is known as business requirements. So once a customer contracts a software company to develop a software, the software company identifies the key stakeholders for the project. This includes the stakeholders from the customer organization as well. These are the stakeholders who will then represent the organization and will be the primary source of requirements for the software development team. The business analyst who leads the requirements gathering process will be talking to these stakeholders to get the requirements. These typically are more detailed versions of the requirements which are given by the stakeholders to the development team led by the business analyst. This will include key functional behavior of the expected or the proposed system. Like a visitor to the website should be able to search for the product. A visitor to the website should be able to compare the products. These are the types of stakeholder requirements. However, as a business analyst, you must understand that these requirements are not sufficient enough to be converted into a software. So these requirements have to be developed further into solution requirements. That is, what is the requirement of the solution? That's why they are termed as solution requirements. These requirements are quite detailed and captures each and every aspect. The solution requirements are of two types, the functional requirements and the non-functional requirements. We are going to look at these two requirements in details. The last bit of the requirements, which is also captured during the requirements gathering process, is known as transition requirements. These requirements are temporary in nature and they arise because of the customer requirements. For example, if you have to implement a new system, you have to train the users in the customer organization. There could be a requirement to migrate the data from the previous system to the new system. These are typical transition requirements, and once they are done, they are closed and it's not taken forward. So now let's look at what are functional requirements. As you remember, functional and non-functional requirements are types of solution requirements. Functional requirements, as the name suggests, it's all about system features, but more precisely, this is the way a user is going to interact with the system. That's the critical part of classifying a requirement into a functional requirement. Typically, In language format, they are identified by action phrases. Let's look at some of the examples. Register a user in any system is an example of a functional requirement. Of course, you can realize that registering a user requires a user to enter certain details before they can register. So there is an intervention by an external party to do so. Similarly, searching and comparing products, making a payment using credit card, viewing new emails if it's an email application, responding to customer service requests. So functional requirements are typically represented by behavior or the functionalities where an external agent is always involved. So then what are non-functional requirements? Non-functional requirements are typically the attributes of a system. They are not always related to an external agent. These attributes could be related to performance, look and feel, security. There are many aspects which can be categorized under non-functional requirements. Some of the examples of non-functional requirements: that the data transfer must be encrypted. There should be no data which will not be encrypted and is getting transferred. So think of a website with HTTPS as the prefix on the URL. Think of a website with a good performance in terms of page loading. So if all the pages are loading in less than 2 seconds, that could be an example of non-functional requirement. So if customer says that my website is such that people don't want to wait any longer than 2 seconds, that becomes a non-functional requirement. The system, if it's an e-commerce website, typically you're expecting lot many users and visitors to the website. That means the customer expects that the website should be able to support 1 million of users or thousands of users at a time. These are typical examples of non-functional requirements. Let's summarize what we have covered in this particular video. We have covered different stages of requirements evolution. We started with business requirements. Then we talked to the stakeholders to get these stakeholder requirements. Then we evolved the requirements further to convert them into functional and non-functional requirements. At the same time, transition requirements were also captured, which were temporary in nature. To summarize, please note that non-functional requirements may or may not involve coding. Like implementing or making a site secure might only be buying the HTTPS or the security requirements from a hosting provider. Most importantly, you should note that non-functional requirements will require teams in the software development organization which are not purely from development side. So this might require involvement of infrastructure teams, support teams. So this will always be involving somebody who is non-development team. When the project manager, the last point to note is that when the project manager is making a schedule for the project managers always take into account the implementation and the requirements which are either functional or non-functional. This is a typical way of scheduling and planning for a particular project. So in this session, we covered functional versus non-functional requirements and certain other aspects related to requirements in a software project. Thanks for being part of this session. See you soon.